The Land Back movement is a growing global campaign to restore indigenous territories to indigenous peoples around the world. The campaign is led by indigenous communities who are fighting for the return of their traditional lands, territories, and resources. This movement has been gaining traction in recent years and is becoming increasingly visible as indigenous people seek to reclaim their rights and sovereignty over their ancestral lands. Indigenous people have long faced displacement from their traditional lands due to colonization and other forms of developmental projects. In many cases, this displacement has resulted in indigenous people living in poverty and without access to the resources they need to survive. The Land Back movement seeks to address this injustice by reclaiming indigenous lands and territories and restoring them to indigenous peoples. The Land Back movement is a call to action to governments, corporations, and other entities to recognize the sovereignty of indigenous peoples and to respect their rights to their traditional lands. It is also a call to recognize the importance of protecting indigenous lands and territories in order to preserve indigenous cultures, languages, and ways of life. The movement is built on a foundation of indigenous peoples' rights, which include the right to self-determination, the right to their traditional lands and resources, and the right to free, prior, and informed consent. These rights are enshrined in international human rights law and are essential to the protection of indigenous peoples' territories and cultures. The Land Back movement is also focused on promoting indigenous rights to land management, which includes the right to determine how land is used and for what purpose. This includes the right to manage and conserve traditional lands, the right to determine what developments are appropriate, and the right to benefit from the use of traditional lands. The Land Back movement also emphasizes the importance of land stewardship, which is the responsibility of indigenous peoples to manage and protect their traditional lands. This includes the protection and conservation of natural resources, the preservation of traditional knowledge and practices, and the promotion of sustainable development. The Land Back movement is a powerful movement that is growing in strength and visibility as indigenous peoples around the world demand their rights and sovereignty over their traditional lands and territories. It is an important part of the global struggle for indigenous rights and self-determination and is essential to the protection of indigenous cultures and ways of life.